Hi everyone, and welcome back to Lemon Dew. I'm Brie, and in today's episode, I have decided to talk about a bit of a controversial topic, more or less relating to why I don't really like my skin colour and culture. Now, of course, if you do disagree with any points that I make, it's absolutely fine. And I know this topic may be something that some of you might not be comfortable with, but of course, as this podcast relates to the topics of autism, clinical depression, and occasional topics I'm interested in, I wanted to use this platform to discuss my thoughts on why I don't like my skin colour and culture. So without further ado, let's begin. So I guess for some time, I've always struggled to accept myself as a black person, more specifically a black woman. I feel that when you're a black person, there are often quite a lot of struggles that you experience that people of other races don't understand, more particularly racism, which I will explain a bit more in detail. Considering that I am black as well as autistic, these are two different things that don't really mix together very well, and I guess it's because disabilities in general are not really addressed properly with black families. So growing up, in terms of my experience with dealing with extended family members, as I've mentioned episodes back, I've had instances where majority of my family members didn't really understand my needs, and I guess being autistic as well made it difficult for me to advocate for myself, especially when it came to experiences where I was verbally abused or gaslit. And because I'm not really much of a sociable person, I've noticed that other black people in my family have often treated me differently. And I guess it's because I never really wanted to go to family events because I didn't feel like I truly belonged. And I think what made things worse is the fact that most of my family members love to center themselves in drama and generational arguments, which is not really something I enjoy. And of course, this is one of the many negative stereotypes associated with black people, in which the community in general is known for fighting and causing drama, which is something that embarrasses me, to be honest, because I feel like it just paints every black person in a negative light. So in the case of mental health issues as well as disabilities, black parents or families in general tend to be in denial, and they either treat you poorly, which I've experienced to a degree, or if you are in a situation where you live in a third world country, most of the time issues get swept under the rug because people don't really want to deal with anything. People just kind of avoid certain problems, or in some cases, depending on how severe the issue is, you will get put into an institution because no one really cares about your problems, and going to an institution is basically the easy way out for a lot of families. And I guess in terms of black families, I really do feel that a lot of them are stuck in this sort of old school third world mentality. And I know this probably sounds like an insult to third world countries, but what I mean by this is, if say you are in a situation where you've been abused and you live in a third world country, it's very difficult to advocate for yourself. So going back to my episode where I discussed the topic of abuse and brought my mum into part 2 of that particular episode, she explained some of her own experiences where she unfortunately was a victim of sexual abuse, and she never told her family members because nobody believed her. And that is unfortunately the nature of Jamaican families. Not all of them, but the majority, is that if you are abused in such a way, people will assume you are lying, and therefore you cannot talk about the issue. And that was what my mum chose to do. She chose not to talk about the issue because she knew most of her so-called family members wouldn't believe her. And I guess with abuse in particular, there is this whole thing about not shaming the family, and it's a bit of an ironic thing because the family themselves are hypocrites for allowing such a thing to happen, especially the religious types who like to believe in second chances, which for me, in that case, doesn't exist. Now, in terms of why I don't like my skin color or culture, I suppose mainstream media has kind of, I guess, influenced me to feel that way. I don't know if that's the right term, but I suppose to be more specific in context, a lot of mainstream media shows unfortunately portray Black people in a negative light. So I've watched reality TV shows before. I don't really watch as much of them anymore besides cooking shows and maybe the occasional Steve Wilkos clip on YouTube. But in a lot of reality TV shows, say Steve Wilkos, which I mentioned already, or Bad Girls Club, for example, you often have Black people at the forefront for drama. So you've got issues with colorism, you've got issues where children have no idea who their biological father is, either that or the father isn't present in the child's life. You have fighting, you just have family dysfunction, and all of this creates a poisonous cocktail. And I guess when it comes to reality TV, I do feel to an extent the Black community is made to look foolish or to be industry plants, because it's bad enough that a lot of people think that every Black person is into drama and such, and these types of shows don't help because they are just perpetrating negative stereotypes. And when you view these shows as well, of course you will have a biased view. It's the same thing that applies to, say, people who are on benefits, despite the context being different. Of course, due to poverty porn, which is a thing in the UK, where the government and mainstream media like to portray people on benefits as those who live the life, most working class people will assume that every single person on benefits is a scrounger, which is not the case. Just like with reality TV shows pertaining to Black people, most will assume they will want to start drama, which is not the case. And I guess what doesn't help as well is you do have certain people in the community willingly signing themselves up for shows where producers will manipulate them into doing certain things. They'll be plied with alcohol. So, you know, there's a couple of instances where I've listened to some YouTube interviews with former reality TV stars back in the 2000s who were in VH1 shows like I Love New York and such, and it is a bit of an eye-opener knowing how producers will manipulate people in order to create a show. And of course, with reality TV, the point is to entertain an audience. You're not really going to have many views if people are, say, watching a show where every cast member is getting along. I mean, let's be realistic. That is not really going to happen. And yes, arguably so, my point here regarding reality TV does apply to other races, but I suppose with Black individuals, again, as I mentioned, they are at the forefront. And, you know, you even have shows like Baddies West or something where people are auditioning to get on this show that, again, encourages drama and fighting and all other poisonous crap. And a lot of these people go as far as fighting each other or punching themselves just for their 15 minutes of fame. And I really don't understand why you would subject yourself to that, but maybe that is just how I feel. Now, when it comes to a lot of interests as well, if, say, you don't have any interest in like the mainstream media, you are automatically judged. So for me, most of my interests lied towards gaming, anime, and manga, as well as drawing and reading, because I was an introvert in secondary school, and I often immersed myself in hobbies because I was a socially awkward person. And even now, I still consider myself to be socially awkward in a sense, because I don't really like people much, to be completely honest. I just kind of mask it. And it's not to say I hate everyone, sorry. It's just there are certain types of individuals I don't really mesh well with, mainly those who are self-centered or egotistical and have a chip on their shoulder, acting as if they're better than everybody else. And I suppose in the case of people in general, I'm often used to being let down because I hate trusting people, I really do. So, when it came to my interests, a lot of people would ask me why I was doing certain things and why I was so quiet, which was very irritating because it almost seemed as if everyone around me was trying to change me. And I got to a point where I became fed up of everyone trying to change me. And in the case of socializing as well, a lot of family members would say that I had to get out more and socialize more. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it because I didn't fit in. Now, racism, of course, is another obvious issue. So with racism, it's such a, I guess, sensitive topic or taboo topic in a sense, because most of the time when it happens, people don't really address the issues. And as a Black person, obviously, I haven't experienced racism. However, I'm not ignorant to the fact that it exists. And I think what really bothers me the most about racism in particular, especially towards Black individuals, is the fact that if you try to stand up for yourself, you're often seen as being an aggressor because, of course, again, there's the stereotype out of many stereotypes that you could pull out of a hat in which Black people are seen as aggressive, which is not the case because, I'm a Black person and I don't like to physically fight people. I hate confrontation. And as a secondary school student, whenever there was confrontation and I was involved, I would most likely cry because I was a very sensitive individual, and I still am today, even though I am so trying to be okay with releasing my emotions, which is still a hard thing for me to do, considering that masking has been a defense mechanism that I've applied for years in my life. So, if you experience racism in any way, shape, or form, like I've mentioned, it is very difficult to stand up for yourself, especially in a professional setting, because you are in a position where you have to sort of hold your tongue, knowing that you have to sit down and listen to people spout falsified information. And on top of that, diversity campaigns really bother me. And I know it's ironic because I am a Black woman who is autistic. But the point with diversity campaigns, especially in the workplace, is a lot of them are performative. Let's be realistic. So, when you look at, say, the George Floyd incident, in which you had an African-American man murdered by a white police officer in a public area, you had all of these mainstream companies like Lush, McDonald's, Sainsbury's, Starbucks, whichever mainstream brand you can think of, putting out all these bullshit campaigns about Black Lives Matter and social media hashtags. But a lot of these companies had issues where their own staff experienced racism. And nobody did anything because the companies did not care. And the same thing happened in the university that I attended, in which they, of course, decided to apply a PR campaign as damage control. And of course, you had students, alumni, and current/ex staff who mentioned their experiences of racism. And what did my university do? They did nothing to address the issues. They just sweep it under the rug and call it a day. And let's face it, every company does this because the whole point of these campaigns is to fill quotas. It's performative bullshit. And that is it. And again, it's a controversial opinion, but sometimes in this podcast, I will talk about controversial things that some of you might not agree with. But then again, this is my podcast, so yeah. And another thing I wanted to point out as well is the way I talk. So the way I talk right now, this is the normal tone that I use, although technically I suppose I adopt different tones depending on what kind of situation I'm in. So if, say, for example, I'm speaking with close friends or family, I tend to adopt a more casual tone. Or if, say, I am talking to my colleagues at work, I have a more professional tone. Same thing applies when I'm dealing with queries over the phone or even writing emails, because in a professional setting, that's how I'm used to speaking, I guess. Even if I'm, say, communicating with my manager through text, I write using very formal language because that's what I'm used to doing. Now, no one has really said that I talk white, but you do have instances where Black people who can speak English, like the way I'm speaking now, are told they're talking white because they're not using African American Ebonics, right? And if you talk in a certain tone like this, certain individuals of the same skin color, sadly, will feel threatened because they will assume that you have a chip on your shoulder or that you are on a high end of the totem pole when all you're doing is trying to communicate in a way that works for you. I will say though, I have had experiences in my secondary school where people have said that I had a posh accent, which is not really true because I don't come from a posh area. At least the area I was born in, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a posh area. I would just consider it a working class area because I've never really come from an affluent family as such. I wasn't born into poverty either. I just came from a working class family where my parents grafted from their teen years, and that is that. Although I've had a few experiences where people have actually asked me if my hair was real, which is a very strange question. So I remember when I was 19 in Jamaica, when I went there for a holiday with my mum, I had this woman who was a staff member at the airport asking me if my hair was real, which, I don't know, to me it came off a bit offensive because it's almost insinuating that Black people cannot show their natural hair. And even though I do relax my hair, the hair I have on my head is real, unless I'm wearing braids or something, if I want to, say, change style. Either that or I've had experiences where people have tried touching my hair, and that is kind of insulting again because for me, I feel like an object or an animal, not an actual human being, So yeah, I really don't like it when people ask me questions like that, to be completely honest. I really don't like it whatsoever. Now, another thing that I suppose I want to mention a bit is, how I feel when I look at myself. So I'm going to be honest, sometimes when I look at myself in the mirror, there are instances where I hate what I see because it's like, I don't really like how dark my skin is. And even though people around me say I have light skin, I don't really believe it. And I don't know, I think it's because I'm ashamed of the fact that I belong in families that are very dysfunctional, because both sides of my family are very dysfunctional. My mum's family are not really emotionally present, so to say. And my dad's family are just hypocrites and abusers, although my mum's family is more or less the same. So I guess in a sense, it's like, I don't really feel like I'm Jamaican enough or anything like that. I mean, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, obviously my mum is Jamaican, therefore I do technically share part of that culture, but I don't really feel like I belong in that culture because I wasn't born in the country. I don't really understand certain things, you know. I don't know how it feels to say go without food or water and things like that because I've never experienced it before. And it's not to say I haven't had struggles in life, but it's not exactly the same as what my mum endured in her teens. So I'm not going to pretend that I understand things I've never experienced. I don't know. I just feel like I don't fit in with the culture. I mean, I can't really speak patois either, so I suppose that adds into it. But in general, I just don't feel like I fit into that culture, nor do I necessarily feel that I fit into British culture in a way, even though I was born in the UK. I just don't know. I feel as if I don't belong in either side. I'm just kind of half and half. So think of, say, Noughts and Crosses, that book by, I forgot what the author's name was, Mallory Blackman, I think that's the name. But yeah, think of the Noughts and Crosses series, in which the two main characters had a daughter who was half naught and half cross. So, you know, she didn't necessarily belong in either culture, if that makes sense. So I guess that's kind of how I feel. But I suppose besides that, I just don't really like the stereotypes that are perpetuated. I just don't like it at all. And I just don't really want to add to it. So I've already expressed to people that know me very well that I don't really intend on having a family with like a man that's of the same skin color as me, because my concern is that I'll be adding to negative stereotypes, and I just don't really think I would have the emotional capacity to sort of cope with being a single mum. And I think it's because I've sort of seen instances where some family members have had kids with different partners, which I think is kind of wrong in a way, because you're sort of confusing your child. And I'm one of those people that's a bit old school when it comes to parenting, even though I've never had kids. I just think every child deserves both parents, and they have to have the same parents. So like if you have a set of siblings, they have to have the same mum and the same dad, and they will know who their real parents are, because every child has the right to know who their real parents are. But yeah, I don't know, I just kind of feel certain things, and I don't know if I'll ever accept my culture, but you know, obviously it's just things I have to deal with one step at a time. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to today's episode. So the next episode, which will be released on the 20th of October, is on autism and forced social interaction, which is a topic I've really wanted to delve into for some time, because I wanted to discuss my experiences with forced social interaction, which is something I've always hated from childhood, you know. So this episode, as per mentioned, will be released on a Sunday as always on the 20th of October. And of course, the 2-week schedule will continue unless things do change. So I really hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. And as always, thank you so much for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot knowing I do have an audience that actually likes the content I put. Now, I do try my best to provide quality content, and I just want to be authentic, you know. I don't really edit these podcasts as such, because I just want them to be very casual, like I'm talking to a friend or something, because that's just kind of how I am as a person. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and you will need as much relaxation as you can get before the new week begins. So thank you for listening, and this is goodbye for now until the 20th of October.